Thank you, John Aiken, Chrissy.
Go on, Dave.
Once again, please thank relationships advisor John Aiken. He's the king. Oink, oink. Remember when we said conduct a post-mortem on your ex, we don't mean you have to terminate them first, okay? Just checking. Now here's Nikki. Friday morning, you're with The Circle. Now, when you think that you're in a loving, stable relationship, an affair or news of an affair can bring down the walls of your life.
I slept with someone.
You tell me this in Home Depot because you know I hate a public scene?
No, that is not why I'm telling you.
I knew it. You asshole.
I'm sorry. Look, I talked to Neil. I told him, and he said I could stay at his boat for a while.
Excuse me? Now you're moving out. You're like, leaving me?
No. I just assumed that you wouldn't want me to.
Is that what you want?
No.
Oh, it's heartbreaking, but the question is, where do you go from there? Relationship psychologist John Aiken says relationships can survive infidelity. To tell us how, please welcome John to the couch. Yay! It's a heavy subject, John.
Yes, it is a juicy topic for us this morning.
Now,
but
when someone cheats, the relationship is definitely changed, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a huge trauma that happens to the relationship. It results in all sorts of fallout, a lot of pain. And if you do some of the key points that we're going to talk about today, you can recover from it. But it is a long road.
And you say you have to sort of stick to these points, you think, in order for couples to come out the other side?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it will very much fall on the shoulders of the cheater, the person that's gone out of the relationship.
Okay.
If they're not really prepared to do the hard yards. Exactly.
Let's talk about number one, stop all contact with the lover.
Yeah, so if you have had sex outside of the relationship, that person basically you have to sever all contact with them.
Yep.
And if you're at workplace or if they're the next door neighbour or they're in the same social network, you can have problems there, but you've got to literally cut them out.
Let's talk about that, because how extreme does that have to be? If your hubby has had an affair with the secretary at work, does he have to basically say, I am prepared to change my work environment and move firms?
Well, if he wants to put the marriage first, he might just have to do that,
Wow.
or even move cities. I've seen people that have had to literally pack up and leave and go somewhere else. Yeah.
What about the phones, the emails, what is the partner or the one who's been cheated on meant to do with all of those things?
Yeah. Well, once again, what you got to do is if you've cheated on the person, you got to suck it up and say, I'll do whatever it takes. You got to be remorseful and accountable for your actions. Forget about it being an accident. It's a choice. It's a bad choice. You could have done any other things. You've gone down the wrong path, and now you have to do the hard yards.
Yeah, I guess that accountability that you're talking about is pretty much the most important thing in couples being able to move through this.
That's right.
And it might stop the person who has been cheated on from turning into some kind of Inspector Clouseau figure that's always checking phone bills.
Okay, what about this one? Answer questions about the affair.
Now, a lot of people think that you shouldn't talk about it. You should just move on, sweep it under the carpet. Well, what will happen is you'll suffer in silence. The person,
won't you?
Absolutely. So you've got to ask those gruesome questions and answer them if you've cheated. And it might be the different sexual positions or the type of underwear that they were wearing.
It might be, did you ever tell her you love her? Or
yes.
something?
What sort of feelings did you have for them? How often? I mean, it can get gruesome.
That's pretty full on though, John. If you're saying to the person who's cheated, I want to know, what you did.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they should answer absolutely everything you ask.
Yeah, everything. Because if they don't, imagine what they're going to think. They're hiding something. And this is going to grow a massive wedge between them. Now, not everyone wants to know the details, they just move on.
Yeah.
But a lot of the people want to know the specifics, and if they don't get them, then the trust doesn't build.
Okay, what about changing the rules or adding new rules in?
New rules, so it might be you've got to come home at 6 o'clock from work, or I want you to bath the baby, or I want you to spend more time with me, talk every time when you come home, or I want you to cut out those toxic friends and drink less. Whatever the rules are, you've got to jump on board.
And John, in your experience as a counsellor, do these sort of new rules stick, or is it just a year-long stopgap?
Well, they go on. I mean, if you've decided to cheat on your partner and your partner wants those bank accounts or wants to access your emails forever and a day, then that's the bottom line.
I love that you're using the language, if you've decided to cheat. Because I think that's a really important message. You put yourself in this position, you've made a choice. What about address ongoing relationship issues?
Now that's the final part of it. If the person has shown remorse and is accountable and following these rules, then you move to the relationship and say, okay, what's not working here that we could do better? So it might be communication, spend more time together. It might be that, you know, we've got to manage the finances differently. So you're looking at reworking the relationship so it's different from the way it was before. So if you've got different, new and fresh, then you've got trust coming back into it.
Can we talk about some of the myths about infidelity? Yeah. Because I think one of the myths is that the partner wasn't getting enough sex, so that's why they outsourced to somebody else.
Yep, and the bottom line is that people will have affairs even if they're having sex at home, because sex doesn't mean connection.
Yeah.
You know, so you might be, you know,
What
jumping.
does sex mean? Sport.
Well, for some people it might be a release.
And
you
it
know,
could
but
be
they're not actually
conquest as well.
Yeah.
Conquesting females.
And then bizarrely, it can be so hard to get, you know, your levels of intimacy back on track after, even though the person has just treated the sex like sport.
Yeah. So that's a really good point. In terms of rebuilding intimacy after an affair, the person that's been hurt, that's been betrayed, they have to set the rules. From touch and affection to sleeping in the same bed together to actually having sex, they need to lay it out there quite clearly.
Can I ask you, John, about two different scenarios? In the scenario we saw in the film there, he confessed and he came home and he said, I've slept with someone, and he actually, at least, was honest enough to tell her the situation.
Disclosed it.
Yeah, in your position as a psychologist, how do you compare couples where the person's come home and confessed and been big enough at least to admit that, to getting sprung? Because I think that's two totally different scenarios.
Well, it goes towards accountability. You know, when you are confessing, you're putting your hand up and saying, I've done this, and I'm sorry, and I want to try and move this forward. Whereas when you've been sprung, you kind of, okay, well now I might have to go back to this marriage and make it work. So you're not as accountable, and you know, often, you know, that plays out to make it a lot slower in terms of the recovery process.
But when do you know that it's actually best to perhaps
Pull the pin
and move on? That must be incredibly
What you
difficult.
do is you look at the person, you say, right, are they accountable here? Do they think it's an accident? Are they blaming it away? Excuses? That's a bad sign. If there's no remorse or real deep feeling about how it's impacted on the person or the family or the kids, bad sign. If they say, well, you're not getting access to my passwords on my email or my phone, because that's mine, and I have a very important job and you can't have that, bad sign.
And it's also interesting that you said it's not necessarily a physical affair. It can be just other forms of betrayal.
That's right. Absolutely. You can have the emotional one.